Xtalks is the industry leader in connecting life science, food, healthcare, and medical device professionals. The Xtalks Life Science Podcast features insightful conversations with industry experts about all things pharma, biotech, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. I'm Ayesha Rashid, Senior Life Science Journalist at xtalks.com. And this week, I am so delighted to be joined by a very special guest. With us, we have Dr. Ben Hwang, who is Chairman and CEO of Profusa, which is a company developing a platform of new generation bioengineered, biointegrated sensors for the real-time monitoring of body chemistry for chronic disease management and health. The sensors detect and continuously transmit medical-grade data for personal and medical use. Dr. Hwang has served as Profusa's chairman of the board and chief executive officer since January 2012. Prior to Profusa, Dr. Hwang served in a variety of leadership roles at Life Technologies, which was acquired by Thermo Fisher Scientific, including president of the Asia Pacific region and head of the qPCR division. Prior to joining Life Technology, Dr. Hwang was a consultant with McKinsey Company. Dr. Hwang received his MA in biology and PhD in biology as well from the Johns Hopkins University. So to learn more about the work that Dr. Hwang is leading in the health monitoring space at Profusa, let's turn to him now. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you so much, Ayesha. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for making the time. I'm excited to share with you what we're doing.
Oh, likewise. The pleasure is all mine, all ours here at Xtalks, and we are so looking forward to the conversation and learning more about the really cutting edge and amazing work that you're helping lead at Profusa. And I'm so excited about this because we hear about health wearables, health monitoring technology. It's been around for a while now, but really we're seeing so many innovations in the field. And so I would love to learn more about Profusa specifically, of course, and the innovations that it's focused on in terms of the company's bioengineered sensor platform, what it entails, and what possibilities you're looking to bring to patients ultimately.
Yeah, thanks. You're absolutely right. I think over the last 20 years or so, give or take, there have been multiple shots on goals and a lot of really dedicated, smart people and companies who are trying to integrate and stitch together, if you will, the wonderful advancements that were happening in the physical sciences, taking advantage of the computational power, the miniaturization of electronics, and quite frankly, the whole notion of putting supercomputers in our pockets. And and those technologies have transformed all our lives, one would argue, for the better, for the most part, from going from point A to point B, understanding real-time traffic patterns, to how we conduct commerce in the day-to-day lives, shopping, to doing research, getting real-time information about little side bets or little arguments with your family, to doing really important work professionally and academically. The one area that really this confluence of technology has not been able to move the needle much really has been healthcare. And it's always kind of stuck with in our minds that what was it that held back the application of this wonderful technology into healthcare so that we can make real-time decisions about some of the most important choices for ourselves and for our loved ones, with real-time data, be able to get professional and physician input to make healthier choices. It's impacted our lives in so many other ways positively, and it just hasn't touched healthcare. And what we kind of realize foundationally is, one, science and technology is a field that we build off the shoulders of giants. So there are a lot of wonderful company and dedicated people, as I mentioned, that actually trying to solve this problem. But ultimately, I think the gap wasn't breached because the data that's being gathered were not the kind of information that physicians, quite frankly, care about. So use a really maybe unfair example. We all have, for a while it was Fitbits, and how many steps are you walking per day? Wonderful technology. I think it got the entire society thinking about health and activity and activating their energy into living healthier lives, and that's great. But when you go into healthcare and the real high value decisions that need to be made, counting steps and how many steps have you walked is not something that a doctor would actually, I don't want to say care about, but can't make any decisions off of. And so they still have to take biochemistry information, which currently is in the mode of a blood draw, send it to a lab, and then they could actually look at it and say, hey, your sodium level, your glucose level, your potassium level is at certain ranges. And then with that data, they could actually make a therapeutic decision or choice or recommendation. And we felt that that's always been the gap that can we leverage the understanding and technology that exists out there today and create a data stream as simple as looking at your phone, but as profound as real-time information where a physician could look at it and say, I know what to do with this number because there's decades of clinical publications and decades of clinical science and knowledge and experience that tells you what these numbers mean. And if you can actually do those two things, where create a data stream of information that doctors care about, but do so in a form factor and a cost basis as easily accessible as a phone, as a pedometer, as an Apple Watch, then we think we could really bring this power of the technological advancements over the last 20 years and apply it to healthcare so that the impact on our lives in healthcare is as profound as Google Maps to get you to work safely, as profound as shopping online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and create real-time access to information that makes our lives better. And so that was the mission that we actually set out to do. Unfortunately, we were able to make some critical foundational scientific advancements that allows us to actually bring that technology to the market.
Wow, fantastic. And I really love how you gave context to how the technologies out there really haven't been able to translate as effectively into the healthcare space. And so really, thank you so much for providing that very important context. And yes, counting steps is not very useful data for clinicians in order for them to make important decisions around diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment. So absolutely. And
Exactly.
really excited to learn more about Profusa in terms of its platform technology and really what are the things that it can really help monitor, as you mentioned, of course, looking at really the biochemical and chemistry underlying pathophysiology, diseases, and health states as well. And so really, what is it that the technology that you're developing at Profusa is honing in on?
Right. So let me spend a couple of minutes describing the technology platform itself, and then maybe I could add some color on why we think that's actually important. So our technology is, as you mentioned, a platform technology, and basically all that means for us is our sensor platform can measure multiple different what we call analytes, or things that are actually you're measuring, the concentration of things that you're measuring. So we can measure multiple flavors. And it's got three major components. One component is a very small sliver of a material. We call it the sensor, but it's actually made of a class of material called hydrogels. And hydrogel is a fancy way. If any of us, I wear glasses and I have contact lenses at home. If any of us actually have ever come in contact with soft contact lenses, a soft contact lens is made of a class of material called hydrogels. Long track record of being biobenign, so it doesn't elicit major inflammatory responses. The body tolerates it very, very well. Long track record of safety. And it's soft and pliable, so it's not hard. In that sliver of hydrogel, we embed on it uh, chemistry that basically binds onto, if it comes in contact with what you want to measure, it's like a lock and key model. So our chemistry that we embed on the hydrogel has a pocket. And if you want to measure oxygen, oxygen will combine into that pocket. If you want to measure glucose, glucose will bind into the pocket very specifically. And then on that chemistry, there's a moiety, or there's another feature on it that gives off light under the right circumstances. So that chemistry that we built that has the lock and key with a feature that gives off light, whether the molecule is bound or not, we embed that onto the hydrogel. And the hydrogel is about 400 microns in diameter. It's very, very small. It's about 3, 4 millimeters long. And that hydrogel is injected very simply via hypodermic needle just under the skin. Now, we call it a sensor, but every time we say sensor, it creates a mental picture, right, of batteries and coils and all these electronics components. It really doesn't have any of the electronic components whatsoever. It's just that hydrogel, soft and squishy, with a chemistry bar on top. Now we inject it under the skin, and it's sitting there. It's sitting there passively in the interstitial space, which is just a fancy way of saying it's the space that your cells actually live in. So your cells, all your cells in the tissue is there, and the interstitial fluid is all around. That's what the cells actually experience. So our sensors are there right next to it. And it's the special sauce, if you will, and there are many special sauce, but one of the special sauce, if you will, is that hydrogel sits under the space and it lives there, and it could actually live there and function without what's called a foreign body response for a long, long time. And now the second component comes in. I have that hydrogel there. There are no batteries, electronic coils. It's just kind of sitting there. And then you have a reader that you put on the surface of your skin over that sensor. And that reader is engineered to be able to shine light through the skin anytime you want a data point. That light goes through the skin, it hits the hydrogel. The hydrogel, because of that feature with the light transmission, it gets excited by that light coming in. It gives a return light that goes back through the skin. On that same reader, there's a photodetector. It's similar to a photodetector that you might have on your phone or your camera that detects light coming in. And it basically, quote unquote, takes a picture of how much light is coming through. And that reader sits on the skin. It could be used for, 2, 3, 4 years, a long time. It's rechargeable. And anytime you want a data point, the firmware just tells the reader to shine the light through the skin. And then the data that's gathered then gets to your phone, and the algorithm to take that raw signal and convert it into a number that a physician could actually use becomes how the number is actually reported. So a soft hydrogel sensor under the skin, the reader on the surface of the skin, and then the algorithm on the phone. Now, if I did a good enough job explaining that to you, Ayesha, on how the sensor platform works, there's a couple of really important advantages that comes through from the way we actually designed this platform.
Yeah, you absolutely explained it fantastically, and it's super cool. I just love how you broke it down piece by piece, and it was just so easy to understand and just really highlights how cool the technology is. It's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I wish I could take credit for it. It's the team that actually really smart people behind the scenes that made it happen. And there's some advantages that comes along with how this platform actually is architected. I think one major advantage is through evolution, our bodies are incredibly exquisitely good at determining what belongs inside the body and what doesn't belong inside the body. So you can imagine any of us who's ever had a splinter, the fact that the splinter is in your fingertips or on your toes or on your feet, you may not even know that the splinter is there. But over a couple of days, you say, hey, my fingertips kind of sore. What's going on? And you look down, it's a little red, it's infected. And you can see, oh, I have a splinter in there. That foreign body response is something that's incredibly important for evolution and for our species. Without that foreign body response, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. Our species would have died a long time ago. But with that foreign body response, it also means that if you put any sensing element inside the body is going to be really good at saying, hey, this doesn't belong. I'm going to, quite frankly, get rid of it. And so some biological sensors that are out there, because of the foreign body response, they work for days at a time, and then you have to change it out. Not because the sensor stopped working, but because the body starts to encapsulate and put scar tissue on that sensor. So the sensor starts working, but it's now measuring the scar tissue, which has very little resemblance of what's happening for the rest of your body. So for our technology, one of the major breakthroughs is through the microarchitecture of that hydrogel and the material of the hydrogel itself. We're able to put the sensor under the skin and for the body to not have this huge foreign body response against that sensor. And if you could do that, then the longevity of your sensing platform is now not dictated by a biological response, which that foreign body response will render that sensor to not work within a matter of days. But it's now limited by how long does the chemistry last? How long does the actual chemical components last? And fortunately for us, those are quite stable. So our sensing platform could work for months at a time with one little injection, as opposed to every few days you have to swap it out. The second big advantage is not just longevity, but the second biggest advantage is because that hydrogel has the chemistry that's, as I mentioned earlier, that allows you to measure oxygen or glucose or lactate or sodium or potassium, whatever it is you want to measure. By changing the chemistry and preserving the underlying platform, you could change what your sensors could actually measure. So our first product is a tissue oxygen sensor that for wound care. Second product is glucose. We have lactate, sodium, and others kind of in the pipeline that we've worked on. So this truly is a platform technology. We can measure multiple analytes as you actually go along. The third advantage to this is because that little sliver of hydrogel doesn't have any electronics and coils in it. If you wear soft contact lenses, you know how inexpensive that could be. And because that sensor lasts for a long time, and the more important and the more expensive reader that's got the electronic component in it, you could reuse over and over again. The cost basis of this platform is fundamentally low, structurally low. So that for the cost of a Netflix subscription, for the cost of a couple of Kindle books, almost anybody could actually have access to this technology. And instead of having a blood drawn for a physician to say, hey, I want you to fast, come in, I'll draw your blood, and then see what the number is. And you take a snapshot of what your biochemistry signature is like at that moment in time. For our sensor, you could actually unlock this continuous stream of biochemistry. So you're taking a movie of how your biochemistry is going up and down, responding to your therapeutic choices, how you're eating, what your activities are, so you know how to actually modify your behavior in real time. And I think there's a lot of really wonderful clinical advantages and health and well-being advantages to that. So you measure what doctors care about. You do so in a way that longevity is not an issue at a low enough cost basis where anybody could have access to it and create a data stream in real time that really allows you and the physician to monitor your progress with a movie as opposed to point in time picture 1 year apart. We think fundamentally this will change healthcare the way we know it and really align with all of our expectation of how healthcare should be provided.
Indeed. I think really having honed in on all of the important considerations around building this apparatus, I think it's phenomenal. And really to be able to measure multiple different analytes and then just having something that, like you said, will not be rejected by the body and it's just going to be fully biointegrated. So really fantastic tool and technology that Profusa has developed here. And so in terms of monitoring, different analytes, you mentioned some of them, really what would be sort of the types of indications, conditions, or just even regular health indicators that patients can expect to be able to monitor with a device, the device. Yeah.
Yeah. And thanks, Aisha. Listen, I think uh, even if you leave Profusa aside, if you were to ask somebody or ask a physician, hey, I could give you a patient or an individual's real time biochemistry. What can you do with that information? I think the answer is going to be broad, deep, innumerable, and profound, right? Think about uh, other aspects of our lives in which you have real time information, real time data. It really changes how people live and changes how people actually make real time choices and make their lives more efficient. In healthcare, is no different than that. So, what I would say is listen, in any chronic diseases that you have to manage, whether you have a stubborn wound that you won't heal because your vasculature is compromised, dialysis, liver and metabolic disorders, heart disease, COPD, any chronic disorders that requires constant kind of management of that disease, diabetes, for example, getting real-time biomarker information out could be invaluable for you to be able to manage that disease. Because what happens is it shortens the intermission, if you will, in terms of your interaction with the physician, and you could actually have much greater cycles and innovation of treatment adjustment outcome, learning from it, treatment adjustment outcome, learning from it. And instead of that happening once every 6 months or once a year, that could actually happen multiple times in a day. And I think that makes a big, big difference, right? So any chronic disorders, I think, could benefit from this type of information. I think the second thing that uh, could make a really big difference is, quite frankly, in terms of actual cost. We in healthcare, you think about cost because it is pervasive, and it is something that we all kind of are concerned about and actually worry about. But beyond the empowerment of making decisions in real time in a patient's hands or individual's hands, when you could do this, when you could actually have well-informed, well-structured, productive conversation with your healthcare provider, and you could do that at home instead of being in the clinic. What you end up doing is not just creating a wonderful, better lifestyle for a patient who's already managing these disorders that are probably more intrusive in their lives than they ever want to be. But what you're doing basically is taking these interactions from some of the most expensive real estate in the healthcare space, which is clinics, operating rooms, hospitals, and put it in the least expensive space, which is in a patient's home, in their car, in real time. And fundamentally brings down the cost of the interaction on top of much better care and more preventive outcome. For chronic disease management itself, I think it'll be incredibly valuable. If you take it even out of the clinic and say, "Hey, I'm just uh, really either worried or my health and my well-being is something that I care a lot about." For those individuals, having measurements that has decades of clinical research and clinical study behind, as opposed to steps, which is just a nascent metric, if you will. For those individuals, having real-time information on what I eat, what I do, how I sleep, and how it impacts my biochemistry, and therefore I could adjust what I do, how I eat, how I sleep, I think will actually have a really profound effect as well. So I think we're just starting to scratch at the tips and the surface of what real-time biochemistry monitoring can mean, both for the patients as well as the systems at large. But we think that it's an incredibly exciting future, and we should be making a big difference in people's lives. We hope.
Absolutely, and I think at the end of the day, of course, it's all about the patient. And do you envision this? I wouldn't say to replace, but is it something that could be comparable to a blood test, or maybe somehow semi-replace or complement blood tests? A lot of people have hesitations, and depending on what kind of, let's say, chronic disease that they're managing, some may need to do finger pricks more often, for example, to test their glucose levels. So I'm envisioning that in that setting, that would definitely be something to complement or to perhaps replace. But even going for a regular blood test, checking your electrolytes or calcium levels in the blood, is this something that could potentially even replace technologies in the clinic currently?
Yeah, Aisha, I actually think I like the word that you use, which is actually to complement. I think this technology absolutely does a good job in terms of complementing the tools that exist out there for individuals and physicians to make the choices that they have. We're incredibly gratified and grateful every day when we come to work that we truly build off the shoulders of giants. And I think, for us to actually trying to talk down or diminish any other approaches, I think it's unfair for them, and it's unfair for us, and quite frankly, underserves the healthcare community at large. Blood tests absolutely will always have its place because there might be folks out there who don't want a sensor in their body all the time. And there are things that we can't measure. We can't, for example, count, how many white blood cells you have. We can't count how many red blood cells you have actually in terms of concentration inside the blood. So all of the technologies that exist out there, I think will always have a place. Or always probably a wrong word, but will have a place because there are certain indications and certain applications where you need these multiple tools to validate each other to make really important decisions. But that said, I think having a tool that enables real-time biochemistry for certain parameters that are important, I think merely adds an additional layer of sophistication, an additional set of data, very important data set to move the entire healthcare system actually forward. I have three wonderful children. At least I think they're wonderful. And I think most other people would too, you meet them. And my goal really is for all of our loved ones as they grow up and as they actually mature, for all of our loved ones to actually be able to be empowered to make healthcare decisions on their own to the extent that that's responsible and have the tools to do so and live healthier and better lives. And, the migration of being a reactive healthcare paradigm into a more proactive and preventive healthcare paradigm, that migration, I think, could only happen if you have real-time data and empower people to understand what that real-time data means. And I think that's really the place that Profusa actually uh, would really be a sweet spot for us to apply our technology.
Yeah, and I really love that. And the way you put it, it really makes it sound like it could truly foster partnerships between patients and providers, which may previously not really be there. So really, having patients with an apparatus in their arm, but also access to data that they're able to look at in real time and potentially, interpret with their healthcare provider. I think it really speaks to a partnership that could really take place, a very meaningful and powerful one. So that's
absolutely.
truly exciting.
Absolutely. We agree with that vision for sure.
Yeah. And so in terms of speaking about data, big data, enormous amounts of data is being generated in today's world with new burgeoning technologies. Not even talking about AI yet or anything, but really how from your perspective, like all of this data that's going to be generated through this platform technology, concerns about data privacy, analysis, and then integration with digital health systems. So how do you envision that kind of an ecosystem around this platform technology?
Yeah, it's absolutely critical for what we do. And for us, it's actually something that's critical in the future for our success. We look at data in a couple of ways. One, the more data that we actually have, the more accurate our sensors can be, right? So our machine learning algorithm depends on a lot of tries and a lot of data sets to actually be able to hone in on what this data actually means and report a more accurate number. So that's table stakes, and we do that all the time and make sure that the sensors actually read. But I think the more important and the data set that actually could be leveraged in this world of AI and exponential increase in computational power is, what do you do with all of this information responsibly, right? And let's be clear about that. So multiple models there, right? One model is, as an individual, having a long-term stream of data and have the algorithm to understand your choices. These choices lead to outcome A, and these choices lead to outcome B. Because you're unique, because your DNA and genetic signature is unique, because of your healthcare history and the treatment paradigm that you're under is unique. Those unique features means that for Ben, this data married to these choices means this outcome. And if you don't like this outcome, let's change again. So I think the power of AI for individualized, personalized medicine with biochemistry, real-time changes, I think will be incredibly important and profound. And you can't have that outcome without actual real-time biochemistry information. to base those adjustments on, right? So I think that's one. I think secondly, if you look at a more systemic level, um, having a large volume of biochemistry information that's tethered to some choices and activity with a heterogeneous population across age and across genetic makeup that's really reflective of the population, I think becomes a very incredibly powerful tool for all of us to create better healthcare delivery paradigms and more cost-effective healthcare delivery paradigms. And what I mean by that, there was a before digitization of commercialization and commercials, if you will, and marketing. There's a kind of funny, goofy quote from a chief marketing officer of a big company say, "Hey, I know 50% of my marketing dollar is wasted. I just don't know which 50% it is that's wasted. So I have to actually spend all of it." I think in healthcare delivery there's a little bit of analogy to that, right? That you have to create the bucket of resources to pay for expensive surgeries, for example, or expensive healthcare, but you just don't know how to do that intelligently. So everybody actually um, uh, kind of shoulders that burden. But if you could actually invest in prevention, and you could actually invest in reactive, expensive healthcare solutions only when it's really needed, then I think foundationally and fundamentally brings the cost of healthcare down, let alone the much greater impact on people's lives and longevity and being more productive. And I think that's the second part of that data, where that data is important, is that data is going to enable those types of decision. Now, the third thing is you mentioned data privacy, and that's clearly obviously top of mind. And one of the benefits of actually our technology platform, the way it's built, is the data and the ability to gather data is completely in the hands of the consumer, right? Because our sensor doesn't have any active pinging. There's no batteries, electronic coils. There's no active pinging of data. If you don't have the reader on your skin, nothing happens. Literally nothing happens. And so anytime you want a break and you don't want data to be gathered, just take the reader off your skin and nothing actually just happens, right? And so the way the technology is built, it really puts the power of data privacy in the hands of the individual, and I think that's a really important feature.
Indeed. I think, yeah, thank you so much for outlining really all of the considerations and really the flow and all of the elements involved. I think that's really important, absolutely, to highlight. And in terms of really the development of this really, really cool tool, what kinds of partnerships, collaborations, when we talk about really, commercial applications and all of that, what are all of those, what do all of those look like? Well, what has gone into really developing something like this, and what goes into developing something like this in today's landscape?
Yeah, so our company in the last, 12 to 14-year history of the company from the beginning until now, we can't be more grateful for some of the collaborations and partners that we have. uh, your audience may appreciate this, and I'm sure you do as well, that, starting a company from scratch is a very difficult undertaking, and not the least of which is funding, right? So having the funding to actually do the experiments and trying to figure out these scientific barriers, if you will, it's a pretty expensive proposition. And so from the very beginning, we had great group of angel investors that actually supported our journey, private equity investors and venture funds, et cetera. But on top of that, we've had partnerships with academic institutions such as Duke and Texas A&M University and University of Washington, in which we did some of the earliest studies squatting in somebody's lab and just trying to figure out how things could work. We received generous grant support from the NIH as well as from DARPA in the U.S., from the U.S. government, from the perspective of uh, understanding that a fundamental question on foreign body response that needs to be solved is something that they would like to actually support. And so, with these partnerships and support, we able to get to where we are today. And going forward, clearly, as I mentioned, we've had tons of opportunities, if you will, on what this kind of technology could impact in terms of the analytes you can measure, the applications you could actually have, and you know, my guess is there are other applications that we haven't even thought of yet, where this technology could actually have an impact, and so we're constantly in conversations and flows and dialogues of institutions large and small to see whether or not our technology and our data and our platform makes sense for some of these partnerships to keep pushing technology forward. We're going to be shipping product beginning of next year. We have a really good and exciting commercial path over the next couple of months to get us healthy. But our mandate and our DNA is the economic success of the company allows us to actually reinvest in the company. That's good. But the fundamental driver is how many people can we help as quickly as possible. And from that tenet, I think all good things will come. And that fundamental tenet means that in addition to our commercial traction and shipping products starting, in the next few months in Q1 of next year, what other applications can we actually um, do? What other applications can we actually apply the technology to? And those conversations are always ongoing, and they're pretty exciting.
Indeed. That's so wonderful to hear. And in terms of clinical data, is there any clinical data that you can share that really stands out or that really speaks to the power of this technology and its potential?
Yeah, so we have a list of publications for clinical data. Our principal investigators, key opinion leaders in various fields that have actually worked with us. We published some on podium talks, etc. And we're very, very pleased that we are able to see the longevity of the sensor functionality that I described to you early, proven out in the clinical setting. We're pleased to see that the metric that we're measuring actually is demonstrating clinical viability as well as clinical utility, being able to help physicians make those choices. And so, this what we're talking about here at one point was a dream, a fantasy. Wouldn't it be nice? At another point becomes, hey, it's actually possible. We could actually do this. And we're really glad that, through clinical validations with partners in Europe and Asia and the United States, we're able to actually publish and share peer-reviewed data that demonstrate that our sensors actually now is ready for to be shipped.
That's awesome. And I know that you have a clinical offering in the European Union that has clearance and approval. And so, what is the status in the US and other regions as well?
Yeah, so not surprisingly, quite frankly, and it was kind of for a long time the standard order or procedure is you get approval in Europe and you come to the US. It's just the requirements are different. So we are working really hard to also get US based approval, working with the FDA and a couple of clinical sites here to actually do that. And we expect to have something to report there. But I think the ability to get the product out to the market through the clinical study, Europe, US, couple of flavors, those are things that we're working on for sure.
Fantastic. And so I want to actually pivot to, really coming from, a background like yours, a very diverse background, first at McKinsey and then on to Life Technologies. And so how have those experiences really shaped your vision and the way you're leading and helming things at Profusa, and what really has shaped your leadership strategy, as they say, and in developing a technology and really importantly developing a team to be able to put that forward.
Yeah, thanks for that question. My background is pretty eclectic, and uh, my time at McKinsey was spent in industries that's nowhere related to healthcare. I think it was credit cards, car leasing, yeah, banking portfolio. At the time, I already had my PhD in life sciences, but McKinsey's experience was really a wonderful experience to expose myself to broader set of industries and issues facing and challenges facing those companies. When I joined Life Technologies, I was in Asia Pacific. That's where most of my time was actually spent, and it was a wonderful time in Asia Pacific. A lot of growth, nascent markets to really mature markets, distributors versus direct sales, some tactical things, and I think one theme that cut across both of those experiences and my other experience are these two themes. One is uh, it doesn't matter how simple a problem may seem on paper. There are a lot of smart people working on these problems that are worth working on, and they're smart for a reason. And there are probably complexities that you just don't know yet. And then the second one is okay, then you don't know what you don't know. You better keep your eyes and ears open and learn as much as you can. And I think that's actually served us well, going through this journey and growing up with Profusa and evolving with Profusa. While I like to think my experience is meaningful and my experience has been applicable, there were definitely many pockets and areas where I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think the willingness to actually be able to say, there's a bit of humble pie to be eaten here. And what can you learn from others? And what can you actually um, take from every one of your mistakes as lessons and turn it into something that actually could propel you forward was invaluable, I think, to our entrepreneurial journey.
That's fantastic. And I really love, not knowing what you don't know, right? So I think that's the biggest sort of blind spot that many of us often have. And just being open to first acknowledging that, I think it's absolutely key for sure. And so, looking ahead, what excites you the most about this entire field? Really, we started off talking about how there's really a gap between all of these cutting edge technologies and their adoption, implementation in healthcare. And so, looking ahead, what do you see the future of real time biosensing being? And its role in personalized health monitoring and personalized healthcare. What are the trends that you see, for example, in the next couple of years, and so
Yeah.
on?
Yeah, I actually think, and we touched on this a little bit, but if I were to dive in and create more color and hone in on one area, it really is um, there's going to be a ton of data that's going to be generated through real time, either biochemistry or steps or contextual data. And because of the wonderful work that's happening in computational power, in hardware, in AI, and all the modeling that's actually happening, I think there's going to be a wonderful convergence of these two fields to really create value in healthcare in a way that it hasn't been created before. But we could get excited about it because it has happened in other places that's impacted our lives. And if you're willing to actually just kind of imagine a little bit to say, what was life like 20 years ago? And what life was like 20 years ago was, you had to pull out a map and I'm going to go here. I'm old enough where I had a Rand McNally atlas in the glove compartment. And when I want to go somewhere, you have to look through it. And how real time maps have really changed the way we commute and how much time that it has actually saved, how much headache has saved. And that's just one really basic example. And you could apply those examples, in so many different places. All of that is driven by a large volume of data, not being afraid to crunch that data and being able to take that raw data and create something valuable out of it in real time that you could trust. I think the most exciting thing that's going to happen over the next 5 to 10 years in healthcare is the data that's going to be unleashed, married to the computational power, married to all of the other players in this ecosystem, from payers to providers to electronic medical records companies. They're all willing to participate in this new paradigm. I think what's going to happen really is healthcare fundamentally will just be better, more preventive, more cost effective. And not only will it make all our lives better, but imagine the productivity that actually means. If you could actually help an individual that's suffering from diabetes and be able to expand that individual's life expectancy from 54 years of age to 75 years of age. They're not saying goodbye to their children early. They are actually being productive and living better lives and be net adds to society. Uh, I can't wait for that to actually happen and see that happen. If we get to play a little small role in that, I think that will be a life well spent.
Absolutely. I love how you put that, and really the impact at the end of the day for patients and society at large. I think just so many implications. And Dr. Hwang, thank you so much for, firstly, your very precious time here with us and for sharing your very valuable insights. And above all, for all of the amazing, incredible, and very important, meaningful work that you're leading at Profusa.
Well, thank you, Ayesha, for your time and for your interest. And thank you for your audience for sticking through this podcast to this point.
I'm sure they're still here right until the end, because it's just so fascinating, the technology and just the journey and all of the implications around it. Truly, truly fascinating and very exciting.
We love talking about it and appreciate the platform to be able to share our story.
Thank you so much. All right, that's the end of this episode of the Xtalks Life Science Podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's show. If you did, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next week. Bye for now.
To join the Xtalks community, visit xtalks.com and register for exclusive access to curated content like live webinars, news articles, and educational videos. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the speakers sharing them and should not be taken as professional advice, nor do they necessarily reflect the policy or position of Honeycomb Worldwide. For further information, email us at podcast@xtalks.com.